demand. And that's not then including the heat, which is another big, if not dominant power demand in Canada. For most household energy uses, heat is about 60 to 70% of the total energy demand. So it's much larger than the electrical demand. And for current diesel generated systems, the subsidized electrical costs are over 10 times the national average, and the true costs are much worse than that. So people pay a lot for their energy. So this brings another advantage in the sense that while a geothermal system, you can look at economics of that, but when costs are so high to run these current systems, that any other thing becomes more attractive. And as mentioned, there's also beyond communities a number of government installations, such as the weather station here at Eureka on Ellesmere Island. So what do we know about then the geothermal potential in the territories? It's complex. Again, this is a big region. Canada is the second largest area, second largest country in the world. And the geology is quite complex, as you can just see this map of the Arctic Islands and northern mainland coast, all the colors representing different geologic units. Very complex, very diverse geology. And you need to understand what the rock types are to understand what the geothermal potential is. But also we have to look at where data is available. And we can take another more simple approach and divide Canada into two categories, the sedimentary basins and not. And it's in the sedimentary basins that we have the vast majority of data on temperature gradients in the country. And that's because this has all been collected by the petroleum industry over the last several decades. So most of what we know on geothermal potential is derived from petroleum wells that are drilled across all these green sedimentary basins. Then we have this big area in the north called part of the Canadian Shield, where we have virtually no data at all. But we have some inferences that we can make. So most of what I'll talk about here now is what we know from the sedimentary basins and what we can kind of surmise about some of the shield areas. And then finally, some of the work that's being done in the Yukon, these other great areas. It's not the shield, but it's part of the Canadian Cordillera, where we have large mountain belts and other areas that can be explored. So our first big thing to realize is that Canada is cold, and northern Canada is even colder than the rest. And this creates an additional challenge of the thick permafrost that we deal with. This is just an example from one well that was drilled up at Mallock on the north coast in the Beaufort Mackenzie Delta. That's just a plot of temperature on the x-axis versus depth. So we're going down on the y-axis, and you can just see the temperature is gradually increasing, but you only get to 0 degrees at about 600 meters depth. And then temperatures start to rise. So this is the challenge because of the permafrost, that you have to drill a good chunk of depth, even just to get to unfrozen water. And that just increases your total drilling costs and drilling depths to reach geothermal potential. The thickness of permafrost varies a lot across the north, certainly thickest up in the Arctic Islands and places of eastern Nunavut, where you get up to 500-600 meters. Oops. Down in southern Northwest Territories and southern Yukon, permafrost is just discontinuous or just a few meters, so it's not nearly as much of an issue. And so there's been probably about over 2,000 petroleum wells drilled within the territories over the last 50, 60 years. And we've looked at all of these, and we've extracted all the temperature information that we can. And this is just the plot of the thermal gradients derived from a selection of those wells, not the 2,000, because that would just overwhelm the plot. But there's some basics that we can come up with. So what's the kind of normal average geothermal gradient in the north in the sedimentary basins? It's about 23 degrees Celsius per kilometer. So if you want to get to high enough temperatures that you can start looking at high efficiency electrical generation, like about 120 degrees Celsius, you have to drill some pretty deep wells in a lot of those areas. So the economics start to become questionable, and even the technological challenges of drilling wells below about 5 kilometers gets difficult. However, there's certain areas we can look at things like salt domes up in the Arctic Islands that have a much higher thermal gradient because salt conducts heat much better than other rock types. So there's these big salt diapirs that exist in the islands, and they have very high temperature gradients. But there's also some areas that we'd call hot sedimentary basins that have very high gradients, 50 degrees Celsius or even a bit higher. And these are located mainly in the southern Northwest Territories and southeast corner of Yukon. So while a lot of the areas is kind of low for considering electrical generation, we do have some parts of the territories that are quite attractive to look at in more detail. I mentioned the shield part, that big part, mostly in Nunavut and parts of eastern Northwest Territories, that we have virtually no data, but we do have bits of data, and this is a depth temperature log taken from the old Con mine site at Yellowknife. So there's the town of Yellowknife and Great Slave Lake, and then the tower of the mine. And these are even lower thermal gradients, so it's about 17.6 degrees Celsius per kilometer depth. And then these rocks, they're just granite metamorphic rocks, very low permeability. So again, not very attractive for electrical potential, but potential for getting enough heat for district heating systems. And one really interesting opportunity is looking at even abandoned mine sites. And in this case specifically, we just finished a study of the Con mine. And because you create these big void tunnels underground through the mining process, they all get flooded with water. And now you have a huge volume of water that's not necessarily at a really high temperature, but with the volume of water and the ease of extracting it, you can extract the heat from the water and use that for district heating systems. And we think this has a lot of potential in this area. And this is work that was done with the Northwest Territories Geologic Survey as well. And I'll just mention too that where most of the shield area we don't have much data, that Nunavut has just recently drilled some thermal gradient wells, and I think have plans to do a bit more drilling just to try to fill in and get a better sense of what these true gradients are, so we can get a better understanding. And if we look more west in Yukon and western parts of Northwest Territories, there's a number of other interesting potential geologic environments that the Yukon Survey and Northwest Territories Survey and us have just been starting to look at. So this is outside of sedimentary basins, outside the shield, but in the deformed mountain belts. And these are things such as recent volcanic belts. There's areas of volcanism in the last even just thousands of years that it has occurred. So where you have volcanoes, you tend to have heat, and this is one of the great parts in Iceland, where you have these hot volcanic systems that drive a lot of the geothermal environment that is there. We have some less active volcanoes in Yukon, but we don't really know much yet about what the thermal impact of those are around the local areas, and is something that needs more exploration. There's a current project underway examining what's called these crustotranscurrent faults. So that's the Tintina fault here, the Teslin suture zone, and the Denali fault. These are active fault systems, kind of like the San Andreas faults, or they're called strike slip faults, where two pieces of the crust are moving adjacent to each other. And you get these little nick points in the fault that create these pull-apart basins, as they're called, and it opens up the rocks and creates lots of fractures and permeability. Great place for fluids to be moving and for heat to be conducting upwards. So the Yukon Survey has just recently drilled some wells around Burwash Landing, near Whitehorse, and near Ross River on the Tintina, testing the potential for these big fault zones. And we're conducting some geophysical surveys and some other temperature surveys to get a better sense of what the potential are along these faults, and especially these pull-apart basins, as they're called. And finally, another aspect that hasn't really been looked at in much detail, but has been just glanced at, is what we call hot plutons. And these are igneous rocks that intruded into the crust about 60 to 80 million years ago. And so they were magma that came up. They've been solidified since, but they're very rich in heat-generating elements, uranium and thorium, potassium, and the radioactive decay of those, it's a natural process, generates a lot of heat. And there's hints that these are producing local thermal systems. For instance, the hot spring near Whitehorse is right beside one of these hot plutons, and there's other hot springs in the territory that are coming up right beside plutons in Yukon and Northwest Territories. So it's something that we just want to start to engage in. We just don't know enough yet. We can put what we know together, though, in some big arm-wavy approaches, and you can look at this in many different ways. And in this case, this approach, we just decided to say, well, how deep do you have to get to 120 degrees Celsius? This is kind of the lower end temperatures you need for high efficiency electrical generation. Most of the territories is white because we have no data to make any judgment on. Doesn't mean it's a write-off, but it just means we can't comment. It's probably low, or you'd have to drill quite deep, though. But as you can see, we get into areas in southern Northwest Territories, southern Yukon. We're looking at drill depths of 2 to 3 kilometers to reach pretty reasonable temperatures that we would estimate needed to produce electricity. So there's areas that are certainly worth further exploration and understanding what the potential is in these regions. Further north, as lower temperature, probably going to be harder to get electrical generation just because of the depths you need to drill to achieve that. But again, don't forget, our real energy need is heat more than electricity in the north. It's the dominant energy demand, especially for domestic usage, is heat, and we can also assess what the heat potential is. So it's just a map looking at how much thermal energy production you could estimate based off the data that's available. So you can see it's the same regions that's highest. This area around southern Northwest Territories and southern Yukon. Certainly, though, there's other communities where the heat is always there. Average air temperatures are so low, it doesn't take much when it's minus 40 outside. And if you can produce 20-degree water, that makes a huge difference on your heat demand, even if it's just contributing a minor component to the total heat needs. So there's a lot of information we can look at, and a lot of potential still to be explored. And then, as I say, much of this region, which is probably equivalent to the same size of all of Western Europe, we have almost no data for, but we can make some inferences based on the local knowledge of the local geology as to what the potential could be and where we can move forward to get more data. So this is I guess, the next stage and where we want to look at. And I'll just end with that.
Thanks very much, Stephen. That's a fantastic overview of where things are and, well, where we've gotten over the last 80 million years of geological history. So thank you. That's excellent food for thought. We'll next turn to Not Thorberg, who's Director of Greenva Iceland. Greenva Iceland is a platform for cooperation on climate issues and green solutions based in Reykjavik, with the intent to promote the export of Icelandic green solutions and renewable energy expertise. So Not, over to you.
Thank you, Per, and thank you for providing excellent insights into the status in Canada, Steve. I'm gonna share here the screen. Can you see my screen now?
We can see the World Geothermal Congress, so your PDF rather than your PowerPoint.
I need to stop sharing. I chose the wrong. Let's see here. Chose the wrong presentation.
Yep.
There you go.
Perfect.
So I'm gonna just give you a brief glimpse of the history of Iceland's renewable energy history, especially with focus on the geothermal part of our history, which started well over 100 years ago. But just to get us a little bit acquainted, well, as you know, Iceland is midway between North America and Europe. So we're a pretty small country in the North Atlantic, but we kind of bridge the continents. We'd like to look at it like that, and we're a small population, but I think we have in all come quite far in the past few decades in all becoming just a part of the modern society, and when it comes to North America and Europe. So we're kind of reaping best of both and willing to work, of course, with a lot of partners in both North America and Europe. Just a little bit about Greenva Iceland. Well, as Per mentioned, we are collaborating together you could say, the private and the public, both the ministries within Iceland, as well as these companies that you see on the screen here, on particular climate issues and green solutions. And we are supporting the export of the solutions that we have here in Iceland when it comes to renewable energy, especially, and associated solutions to that. But we are also very focused on our goal here within Iceland to become carbon neutral by the year 2040. So that is only in 17 years, and that is, of course, a very big undertaking, and one that we, of course, are sharing with all parts of the world now with the climate issues that we're facing. So the task is to eliminate, you could say, the fossil fuel that we are still using today, although we have been able to take out a lot of it in the past 100 years. And today the status is actually that we have reached 100%. You could say with the electricity that is produced in Iceland, as well as the house heating needs. They are met to 100% with renewable energy that come from internal sources within Iceland. And that has happened, you could say, throughout two key energy transitions, which took place. The first one started in the beginning of the 1900s, and the second one during the oil crisis in 1970. And interestingly enough, also, Steve mentioned the potential for heat usage in Canada. You can see here that in Iceland, the proportion of house heating, which is coming from geothermal, is actually 90% from geothermal. So that is, of course, quite a high ratio and instrumental in our energy portfolio today, and has made a big difference. And I'm going to give you a little bit more context to that later on. And if you look at the electricity production as well, we are generating 30% of the electricity today comes from geothermal resources, and the remaining 70% from hydro power stations. So this actually means then that today over 85% of our primary energy is based on renewable energy. And you can see the path here actually, because if we go back to the 1930s, when things really took off and we started using geothermal within the Reykjavik area, and the main town municipality at that point of time. At that point of time, we're using mostly coal and oil for heat and electricity, and then we started introducing gradually geothermal, and as well hydro power, but not maybe at the same pace as geothermal in the beginning. And so interestingly, today, over 60% of our energy, primary energy, stems from geothermal in our portfolio. And hence, I'm going to give you a little insight here into the geothermal component or geothermal.
Around the world, countries are looking for greener alternatives to fulfill their climate commitments and reach energy independence. House heating accounts for 40% of global CO2 emissions. We must reduce heating emissions to reach our goals. In Iceland, where 90% of heating is geothermal, we save 3.7 million tons of CO2 annually compared to oil heating. That's nearly 11 tons saved per person every year. Geothermal resources are available all over the world. Even low-temperature areas are useful for district heating. Icelanders have been using geothermal energy for 100 years. We have the expertise and experience to help you reach your goals. Let us help you give back to the environment. Green by Iceland.
So we hope to inspire other nations, of course, on their path towards reaching carbon neutrality and towards renewable energy options. And gonna touch just briefly also upon how this all happened in Iceland, because I think there are a lot of similarities, of course, between the two nations. But if we go 100 years back, well, Iceland was actually among the poorest nations in Europe at that time, and it is actually also the most sparsely populated country in Europe. But it has had and has a lot of natural resources. Of course, we have been reaping the benefits of the ocean for centuries. But then, of course, we are a volcanic island, and well, we are a bit younger than Canada's territories, 16 million years old, we could say, which means that we are, we have a bedrock full of natural heat to harness. And on top of that, we have, of course, the glaciers, which cover about 10% of the country. And that has, of course, given us also abundance of glacial rivers and streams to harness as well. And you can see here how the volcanic belt, the tectonic plates are going across the island, where the red color is representing where they are meeting, and where you have the high temperature areas, and then you'll have the low temperature areas in the outskirts, further away from the actual bonds. But the geothermal potential is, of course, even if Iceland is a volcanic island, it can be found all over the world. And we've already heard now the potential that could be within Canada, but it's interesting to look at heat maps. If you look at the entire world, and the fact is that the potential is quite widespread, and that is also something to be optimistic about, that even if it maybe takes some time for investments in the beginning now, then it could reap some fruits after a while. And of course, in Iceland, we had been using the natural springs just for bathing purposes for centuries before we started using it actually for house heating, and then at a later stage generating electricity. But what I like the most about maybe our story is that it really started very small. It was just, you could say, very entrepreneurial, and it was just a farmer that decided to start to try to use water from a geothermal hot spring to heat the nearby area. And at the same time, the municipality of Reykjavik was growing very rapidly. The urbanization had started, and there was a lot of people moving into Reykjavik, and at the same time, we had the Second World War. So basically, around about that time, Reykjavik looked like this on a regular day, and it looked like any other town in Europe at that time, because it was heated with coal and gas, and there was a lot of pollution. And when those entrepreneurs started their journey, well, that was very innovative, because very few countries had considered the option of using the warm water for house heating, and not any that we know of at a scale. There had been tests in trying to generate electricity from geothermal, like in Italy and other countries, and that was the initial idea in Reykjavik, but that turned out to be not feasible because it's a low temperature area. So then the drilling that started in Reykjavik in the 1920s actually resulted in that we were able to replace the gas that we were importing and the coal at that time with just warm water to heat the houses. And I think also remembering, the situation that we are in today, and the pressure, of course, that we have is that we need to fast track this transition. Well, we have had a similar situation maybe at that point of time as well, which of course also pushed people to look into new alternatives and new solutions. And it was not like a really easy journey, and but we are very, of course, appreciative today of this courage. Well, both the entrepreneurs and the municipality of Reykjavik and the people that led this transition to begin with. This is just the front page of the morning paper in the 1930s, where it was a question of, a vote for the central heating, because at that point, many people thought it was ludicrous to replace the gas with geothermal resource, which was, well, very much unknown at that point of time. But interestingly enough, though, these visionary leaders also recognized other benefits, just like the pollution of the air. So as this picture illustrates, you could see the gray Reykjavik I was just showing you, and then the clear skies of Reykjavik in the picture. And so the large scale project that then took off in Reykjavik started with leading warm water from a dozen boreholes in the town center. And it was first led to the public school and the national hospital, and then that heating system grew from there. And as far as we know, this was the first large-scale heating system that was installed in the world. But then in the 1960s, the second energy transition took off, and that's when we started looking into how to replicate what had been achieved in the Reykjavik area to other municipalities all across Iceland. And one instrument I want to mention, which was very important during this transition, was the Icelandic Energy Fund, which was a fund which was funded by the government of Iceland, which municipalities could get funds from to start the initial research and development for their geothermal drilling projects. And as you know, they are very costly and they come at a risk to begin with. So the government took on this risk, and if the project turned into a success, then the initial fund would be turned into a loan. And between 1960 and 1983, over 350 loans like these were issued in Iceland, which resulted in 20 central district systems across the country. And again, the extreme high energy cost of the oil crisis in the 1970s accelerated this journey, and there was even more focus on developing this further. So, and this is the outcome. I mean, Iceland today, of course, it has clear skies, as you see here, a very beautiful city. But just as the ambassador mentioned, our transition to renewable energy resources has laid the foundation and is the foundation to our modern society today, and also very, very important. And you could say that all our growth sectors, which you see in this illustration here, very much depend and have depended upon the renewable energy that Iceland was able to implement. And interestingly enough, also to look at this picture is that energy and green solutions have also become a very big part of our export portfolio. Indeed, last year it accounted for nearly 30% of our export portfolio. But moving into renewables is a good business case, and the National Energy Authority has calculated that we are avoiding costs up to around 3% of our global GDP on an annual basis. But perhaps also another really important point to mention is that, by eliminating the imports or limiting them, we have become more dependent, and we have gained more stability and much more security. So, for example, now in the energy crisis, we are not, feeling the heat as much from that as most of the countries in Europe today. And last but not least, moving into geothermal and hydropower has also enabled us to reduce greenhouse emissions substantially, and it's been calculated that over 450 million tons have been saved throughout our transition. I also just briefly like to mention, just like Steve started his presentation, is that geothermal brings a lot of other great aspects. You get the clean air, the drinking water, and you also get a lot of other cascading alternatives to use the geothermal. You can use it in different settings, different industries, where you apply the temperatures, the cascading temperatures from one industry maybe to another, and you almost get into kind of like a circular system. So that has, of course, been one of the paths that we have been working quite a lot on in the past few years within Iceland, and have experienced, gotten a lot of experience in. But last but not least, our journey, which I now touched just briefly upon, has developed a lot of expertise and knowledge in the field, especially when it comes to the geothermal energy, but also in hydropower and power transmission systems, and now this new exciting industry of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And I'm very excited now to hear from the experts on the Icelandic team on their insights. They have been participating, many of the companies that you saw earlier, and these have been participating in projects all over the world and supporting the green transition. And I am very optimistic that we will continue to do so, and I'm really looking forward to working together with Canada and the teams to accelerate the green transition together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Not. Just conscious of time, we will have to reduce the next speakers down to 10 minutes each, just to make sure that we do give everyone a chance to get through their presentations. But that's a great overview, and Not, and I'm sure some of our northern friends will recognize the sort of the use of fossil fuels and with an intention to transition away from diesel, which is really on something on which they're dependent these days. So some clear parallels there between Iceland's history and where Canada is at today. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Deirdre Clark to go deeper into the topic of geothermal development with a focus on high temperature geothermal fields. Deirdre is with Iceland Geosurvey, an Icelandic consulting and research institute focused on providing services to the Icelandic power industry, government, and other companies in geothermal sciences and utilization. So over to you, Deirdre.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say it's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually Canadian American. I've been living in Iceland for some time, and also have ties to the Alberta oil sands. My great grandfather was part of this, so it's also nice to see the growing interest in geothermal in Canada, and I look forward to seeing what happens. Yes, so I will focus on more the power generation side, the high temperature. Just briefly, a bit about ISOR, or Iceland Geosurvey. Actually, in Icelandic, the name means Icelandic Energy Research Institute, so it's not exactly like a geosurvey, but we are owned by the Icelandic government and provide specialized services to the power industry and the government, but also international companies. So we do operate on the free market on a competitive basis, and any profit goes back into ISOR and towards research. We have 75 years of experience. Well, the organizations and the names have changed over the years from 1945 to now, but ISOR as it stands now has been like this since 2003, so just about 20 years. Note showed this map earlier, so or similar map. So this is the geological map of Iceland. So we are like a cold version of Hawaii, but also right on the mid-oceanic ridge. So Iceland is growing about 2 centimeters a year, and so the most active part is the center, so the rift zone, and this is actually where all the high temperature areas are that are marked in red. And then we have plenty of lower temperature areas. So when I'm talking about high temperature, I mean temperatures of about 200 degrees and above. So we have about 7 flash power stations that have been commissioned and installed here in Iceland, 4 around Reykjavik and the Reykjanes Peninsula in the south, and then 3 in the north. The oldest one is actually Bjarnarflag, that's in the north, and that's been running actually since 1969, so quite a long time. And I just want to highlight that as geothermal was developed, with each addition of all the these flash power plants, that has greatly, that's why we've had this increase in geothermal, and we were able to decrease our energy usage on coal and oil to the point that we're not really using coal anymore. Yeah, so, and whenever, so yeah, ISOR and Iceland has had a lot of experience in the development of our geothermal resources, from lower temperature to high temperature. Whenever we are working with a place that wants to develop their own geothermal resource, often there's questions about time and cost. Unfortunately, the answer is, well, it depends. We do recommend a stepwise approach. And I will go through here briefly some general steps and guidelines. But in general, in the beginning, there is a low amount of cost. And then the end product in terms of the total cost, well, it will depend a bit on like where the, what the end use of the geothermal is for. So a flash power plant is a little bit cheaper per megawatt to install compared to the binary. These flash plants can be larger and produce a lot more, but you know, if you don't have 200 degrees, you don't have 200 degrees, but then there's a binary. And then in terms of the risk, yes, there's higher risk in the beginning, but lower costs. And so as we further know more and more about the geothermal resource and what can be done, that does lower the risk, and then you can start to get investors and things. And so the exploration is really the first phase of development. So by this, I mean acquiring any knowledge about the field to identify the energy resource for viable energy production and utilization. And the methods applied include numerous geoscientific methods, as well as the drilling of exploratory wells. And then, yeah, because of the amount of cost, we like to do it in a stepwise thing and always constantly evaluate every way we go. So it is quite crucial actually to do these first steps. So gathering and evaluating any existing data, because this helps set up the rest of the plan of exactly what you need and start to make some estimates of the cost and where you would actually like to go drilling, and then where you would actually want to further explore. So you would want to do geological, geothermal, and structural mapping, take any geochemistry samples of any fluids you might see, do geophysical surface exploration with resistivity, try to create your initial conceptual model, and then start to plan like potentially where your exploration wells would be. So after you do the surface exploration and before you actually do any drilling, you do need to also evaluate, okay, are we going to do something or not? So you're constantly also thinking go or no go, like, are we going to continue or not? Because of the amount of money that is typically involved. I mean, the surface exploration step, this can cost $1 to $2 million, but as soon as you start drilling a well, you know, this is quite a number of millions of dollars that you're all of a sudden putting on the table. So of course, the success rate of an exploration well might be a bit low at the start, but the idea is as you get more information from the different wells, you're getting more information, you're confirming the existence of a resource, and then you would get more successful wells later down the line. This also goes into play. There's often a discussion, are you going to drill a slim well or a normal well? Slim well, I mean, has a smaller diameter, so that would be a limiting factor if you can actually produce from there. But by building a slim well, you're going to save on a few $1 million, and there'll be a smaller footprint, and actually you're de-risking the future cost of a normal well. So if you have a successful slim well, then you know, like, okay, well, we can drill a normal well next to it. But I mean, there's lots of discussion. And also, considering in northern Canada, there might be a lack of road infrastructure, it's actually much easier to transport a rig for these slim wells rather than a normal well. So for example, in Chile, they actually were able to use helicopters to transport a rig. And then in Kenya, where they didn't really have the road infrastructure in some parts, rather than spending $30 million upfront to build the roads, they were able to use some four-wheel tracks and transport their slim drill rig there. I will just skip this. So at some point, you have this pre-feasibility report. So this is with your conceptual model, your first evaluation of the field capacity, maybe a basic idea of the power plant, prospective drilling sites, and kind of this recommendations on the next step. And again, you have like, are we going to do this or not? Go or no go? So with this, though, you haven't yet proven the boundaries of the area you would like to develop. And so also there might not be the most extensive 3D model yet, which, you know, these models will always be improved as you get more and more information. So as you start drilling more wells and testing them, you can confirm your geothermal model, confirm the size, and then make sure you have the well design correct, and test and evaluate always your results. One of the biggest steps you have to do whenever you develop for power generation is the environmental impact assessment. Often this takes up the most amount of time. And then, you know, it's one thing to have an EIA for your drill pad for when you're doing exploration wells. It's another thing to have an EIA for the full power plant itself. Yeah, so it's important to keep in mind this can take some time to complete. But once you have decided, okay, hey, we have these wells, it's confirming everything, we have our impact assessment report, we're getting all our licenses, you have your feasibility report, and you have a better idea of the field capacity, you're starting to get more and more investors. And then the whole thing from there is that you have to think about how the development of the plant would be itself, like how many megawatts. And then we also recommend stepwise approach there. So going, you know, 20 to 50 megawatt steps rather than all of a sudden to 100, 200, 300 megawatts in one go. By thinking in from smaller scale, you're de-risking the chance of over-exploitation and over-investment. An example of kind of what not to do is the geysers in California. They basically planned for a 2,000 megawatt power plant, but the system in the end sustains about 700 megawatts. This is something that could have easily been, it did not need to have happened. You could have done a stepwise thing of going maybe 200, 300, 400 and up from there. So in the end, I think they're running a 1,000 megawatt plant, but they also need to transport in sewage water in order to meet their production requirements, and they're paying a lot of money. So, you know, something to keep in the back of the mind. Yes, of course, you're excited, you want to develop something, you want to get the electricity, but a little bit at a time. So finally, you will have your detailed design of the plant, you're constructing, you're drilling, you're supervising, you're putting together your reinjection system, making sure you have all the infrastructure. And then finally, you can test and commission your well and train all the personnel with this. And so eventually you would hopefully operate your plant, and a lifespan can be 50 years or longer. I think usually we say 30 years before they're written off. But you know, actually, well, we have our small plant, Bjarnarflag in northern Iceland. It's 5 megawatts and it has been running since the 1960s. So you never know. And so I guess this will lead into the next presentation by Berkis. But you know, like, we have, yes, power generation is very an interesting use of geothermal, but there are so many other uses. So if your temperature after exploration is not above 200 degrees, don't fret at all. There's plenty of other things you can do. And actually in Iceland, 40% of the geothermal that we are using is towards power, and plenty more is used elsewhere, like heating. So certainly I get to enjoy nice heat and the swimming pools in Iceland, and that's a direct use right there. I will just leave it with you feel free to contact me if you have any questions, or if you want, you can contact our Director of Business Development and Marketing, Bjarni Richter, and find us on our website for the information if you forget. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Deirdre, for that great advice and information on the step-by-step approach to geothermal development. That's really helpful. I will turn now to Karine Châtenay, who is with Verkis Consulting Engineering, Consulting Engineers. The company provides consultancy and one-stop service for all areas of engineering and has been involved in the geothermal sector since the 1960s.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have, can you hear me and see my screen? Okay, great. I guess I only have 10 minutes, so I'll try to be quick and to the point. I believe actually I have a very important message to deliver to people here in Canada, especially related to direct use. You will have, well, I cannot scroll, that doesn't work. Yeah, you will have my slides afterwards, so you can just browse that. But Verkis, we're consulting engineers, and we've been involved in geothermal for over 60, I believe 70 years now. And our history is closely related to the history of geothermal, but not related, and just told us just before. And these are some of founders here on the screen of one of the foreigners of Verkis. And there are a lot of things that have been accumulating in terms of experience at Verkis on geothermal. Basically, we made all the mistakes you're about to make. That's what we say to people. We've had some trials. We've been involved in geothermal and hydropower. We're also in hydropower in many places in the world, basically everywhere where there is geothermal, but I won't stop on that one. I want to focus today on 4 points. Just to tell you a little bit about what is direct use. Dert presented something on electricity production, but direct use is something that people tend to forget when they think about geothermal. A little bit of focus on space heating, and what are the pitfalls in development of geothermal direct use applications, and just a few tips on the approaches that you could take there. The picture you have here behind has been taken in Friðheimar. It's a greenhouse where they produce tomato. They became very famous some 7-8 years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but when the Kardashian sisters came to visit and took a lot of pictures and everything. But actually, this small company provides jobs for 20 or 30 people in the local society, and I think it makes a difference. We produce tomato, they have a restaurant in the greenhouse, and that's the beautiful thing about direct use. But I promise I would say about what is direct use. This is just maybe not too complicated or fully picture, but indirect use is when you produce electricity, and basically you use a turbine in between. On the other side here, on the right, you have direct use. It's when you use heat directly to do something. You could do many things, and I'm just going to show you on the next slides. We have something in between we're keen on promoting in Iceland because we have many examples, which is combined. It's also called cascaded or integrated use, when we just like do everything, you know, we produce electricity, but we also have direct use and we use the byproducts of geothermal. That's for advanced people. I won't talk about that, but if you want to hear about that, you're welcome. I can give you more info on that. This is a famous Lindahl diagram. It was just developed by an Icelander some 40, 50 years ago, showing the types of uses or types of application depending on the heat of a geothermal fluid. And what I like here about that, what's the beauty about geothermal, is that you have many applications in the agro industry sector. I think it's going to become a hot topic. We've seen that now. We see that just rising in East Africa, in Asia. People are thinking about how can we produce more and preserve the food that we are producing better. So this is very important aspect actually for food safety. And then you have what we very much like in Iceland, which are space heating, not cooling, but we can do cooling with geothermal as well, and bathing and recreation as well. And today, well, just a few examples here, a few pictures, not as mentioned Reykjavik. That's a beautiful example. Here you have the streets that are heated up with snow melting. That's a cascaded use actually of geothermal. After hot water goes through the houses, it goes just in the streets. We also have snow melting in football courts. This is an example up north in Iceland, in Húsavík. Greenhouses, of course, is very important. I mean, we cannot rely on import of food from abroad, and it's really good if you can produce food all year long. This is an example of fish farming in Kazakhstan, which we've seen with geothermal. We also have fish farms in Iceland that use geothermal. Very beautiful examples. We do fish drying. This example I like because I'm from France, but this is direct use where they drilled geothermal doublet, 150 degrees. It's a little bit hot, but that's still direct use. And they pipe it to some 15 kilometers away to a Stark plant, a Stark factory. And I guess this factory today, I mean, this was the production started some 5-6 years ago. This factory is probably very happy today to have geothermal as one of the primary sources of energy, considering, you know, the way the crisis of energy has evolved this winter. Blue Lagoon, not only in Iceland, also in Kenya. And you can do also other things with geothermal, like cosmetics. We have FIDA here has been innovating and extracting silica from geothermal to do food supplement. And you can also extract CO2. The hot topic now is lithium. So you can do many things with geothermal. Just a little bit of focus on space heating. I have a few slides on how we do that with actually low temperature resources. So key components of space heating or district heating in geothermal is that you have a well that just taps into your resource. Usually you have reinjection well, also it's better for sustainability of the utilization. Then you have a heat central, basic heat central, as you would see in other with other sources of energy. It's a little bit special because you have to adapt to the fact that when you go and extract geothermal, you have to return it to the resource at as low temperature as possible. I will just discuss a little bit about that. And then you have the users, you pipe it to the users. It's very simple. I guess many of you who are technical people or who have district heating in your community know how it's done. The part here that is different maybe is the production part, which is just going into the resource. This is just a typical example, and we've developed that on various projects. We believe that we have to extract as much energy as possible, and we can do that with a heat pump. And I don't have much time to talk about that. The thing is that if the area that's here below the curve is the total amount of energy that you need for your community over the year for space heating, then you would be able, with the setup I was showing just before, like a boiler for peak, producing a little bit of electricity or electricity of heat when you need it most, when it's really cold, but using very little energy over the year. And then you just extract some energy with a heat pump, using a little bit of electricity. That's the area that's here. And then you just use as primary source of energy geothermal. And you will have more than 70% of energy coming from geothermal with such a setup. I believe this is really interesting. Business-wise, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to talk about that, but district heating are very flexible. You can also change and switch source of energy like we've seen in one of the communities here in Iceland. But I just want to give you a few tips and just pinpoint a few pitfalls. I mean, when you plan for geothermal district heating, you have to think about many things. You have to think about the resource, the fluid extraction, the distribution. You can make many mistakes there. The users, they are very important. You have to think about how you set up a tariff and a price so that people want to buy and use it especially. And of course, you have to have a strong business case. I mean, if you have the market is not here, it doesn't make sense to just go and develop a project like that. Not as mentioned this, but I believe, and at least from my experience, I've been in geothermal for 23 years now, but developing geothermal district heating is often a political decision. It's just a matter of having the community with you. And I believe that the people factor here is very important factor. So we have this history that not mentioned where some political parties were actually promoting geothermal district heating. It was one of our promises, and I think that was a visionary promise, and they were quite right. Another aspect is the density of users connected. It's connected to a market. If a market is not here, it doesn't work. But it's also another aspect, and I hope maybe Anna is going to talk about that on the legal point of view. Think about, all the red lines that you have here. It's just a distribution, and it's connecting every single house in the neighborhood where you have district heating. Think about it. If you only connect a few points, only the green ones here, you're not going to have a business case. You're going to fail. You have to get the community on board, and you have to connect as many users as possible. We had this law on district heating. This one is from 1940, and the town council was allowed to prohibit houses that were nearby heating supply to be heated up by any means other than with geothermal. And new houses and new installation must be made so that they can be connected. That's very important. It's extremely important. The type of heating system, I'm not going to develop too much that one, but if you have an old heating system, we've seen that in China when we started to work there. Basically, you return the water from the system at 70 degrees. It won't work very well. It won't be sustainable. You will be just extracting water. It will be expensive. It won't be working for the community. We like to have low temperature system, but just use the energy as wisely as possible, as close as possible to the heat that you need. So just a summary, and then I'm done. What kind of approach? First of all, why? Well, it's local. Geothermal is local, and it's part of having a community being resilient and being strong, in the long term. It's renewable. Geothermal is renewable. There are like a few aspects that I didn't touch upon in my presentation, but actually it contributes to food and energy security. And the way we've seen that, I mean, today is just girl power. Obviously, it's only female speakers from Iceland, but it's also an opportunity for gender equality. I'm pretty sure it's a strong case for that, just to make sure that you have this kind of energy. It's also an employment opportunity, and for small communities that are remote, that's great if you can just provide opportunities for your people. And it's a pillar for circular economy. But you need to have a few success factors, and that will be my last words almost. You need to have a knowledge of the geothermal potential. You need to know what you have here, The legal environment, as Anna will touch upon after this presentation, is very important. You have to have that in view. I cannot stress enough that you need to have people with vision, and you need to get people on board. Make just small cases, small, show cases that just like prove to people that it can work. And you can just look around the world, not only in Iceland, in Italy, in other places, in Mexico, where you have like these small cases that just work for the community. When you need a market, you need land access, and you need just to make a business case, of course. Just don't make thing for nothing. Last words, do what you can with what you have, wherever you are. And these are the words of Theodore Roosevelt. And I believe it's beautiful. This project here was in Chumatang in India, and they used geothermal to heat up a school there, so that the students who go there have a little bit of heat. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Karen. Excellent presentation, and yeah, and a lot to take away there in terms of understanding success factors as you plan your project. You mentioned in one of your points, in one of your boxes, the legal aspects, and that's where we'll turn to next. So joining us is Anna Björk Gudjonsdottir from BBA Fjaldco, which is a specialized law firm in Reykjavik and working internationally. Active in the field of energy law that advises clients on the legal environment and helps draft legislative bills and regulations around renewable energy utilization, including geothermal. Over to you, Anna.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I think I'm having some slight technical problems. Can you see my screen? And just the slides?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. So perhaps the first question might be, what is a law firm doing here, and why BBA Fjaldco? So we are a law firm that's based in Iceland, and we also have offices in London and in France. We essentially are a corporate law firm, but in recent years, we've been sort of expanding our focus and growing more into the field of renewable energy. And currently we are working in projects in various countries in the world. We are working on projects in El Salvador, in Bulgaria, the Comoros Islands, Djibouti, and projects in Europe as well. So what we have been doing is that we are providing what we call a gap analysis. So that is usually what we do in cooperations with international development banks and governments. And then sort of as a byproduct of that, we often work with governments on the regulatory framework, and some sort of side projects can also be risk mitigation schemes, corporate and finance, and then training and capacity building. What we have been doing is that we have been establishing a consortium with some of our fellow co-speakers here today, both from ISOR and Verkis. So we are combining the Icelandic knowledge, not just the legal knowledge, but the technical knowledge as well, because the legal framework governing geothermal utilization and just renewable energy sources in general, it's not only legal, it's also highly technical. So in our work, we rely heavily on the expertise of Icelandic technical advisors, and we sort of combine our efforts and make a product. We're exporting Icelandic innovation, Icelandic knowledge, and Icelandic know-how outside of Iceland. And in our experience, these are some of the key issues that we need to focus on in terms of legal aspects of geothermal projects. And I will go into a few of them in more detail. We don't have time to go through every single one, but this is sort of a high-level summary of some of the key aspects. Just beginning with the definition of resources. What does geothermal resource mean in each country? Because the definition can vary. Who has ownership? What are the environmental obligations? And how do we ensure sustainable use? Access to land and access to resources as well. And then something that we sort of focus heavily on is how we can simplify both the licensing procedure and the license and the sort of the communication between the licensing authority and the prospective developer. As has been highlighted earlier today, the importance of state policy must be highlighted and ensured, as it is a fact that countries with successful development of geothermal resources generally have established a clear and realistic policy relating to the geothermal resources. And it is critical to understand the country's potential resources. So it all sort of holds hand in hand. This state policy plays a significant part in the legislation as well, because the legislation needs to sort of hold hand in hand with the state policy. So in our sort of opinion and experience, an important step one is just to ensure that the state policy aligns with the potential development of geothermal resources. The definition, like I touched upon briefly, is something that needs to be reviewed for each country. There is no one universal definition, although many of them sort of align and share certain similarities. Ownership of geothermal resources is something that we need to consider as well. It is generally vested in the state, although there are exemptions, one of those exemptions being Iceland. But as a general practice, the legal framework should ensure that the ownership of the resource is vested in the state, which in turn grants licenses for the exploration and development and exploitation of the resource. We need to guarantee access to land. It is our opinion that due compensation needs to be granted to private landowners, but we don't want to see the private landowners hindering or limiting the development of geothermal projects, which is why this needs to be clear in the legislative framework, how we access land, especially when it is land that is not state-owned, so it's owned by private parties. We often talk about what we like to call a one-stop shop. This picture shows the reality in many countries where a developer, whether it's geothermal or another renewable energy resource, is trying to start a project, and there are so many and various parties that you need to contact in order to get the necessary licenses in place. So in our projects and sort of the recommendations that we have been providing, we recommend what we like to call a one-stop shop, meaning that the developer only needs to have one point of contact. There are often many authorities involved, but there is just one sort of contacting authority, and then has the obligation to reach out to others and get their input, for example, on the environmental aspect of it. So this is something that we sort of consider a really important part of the legislative framework. Data management is, again, something that has been touched upon previously today as well. And as has been addressed, geothermal projects can be expensive, sort of, especially in the beginning. So having access to data is very important for everyone. And we sort of believe that the more data that is shared, the more the interest can grow in a particular area, and it should be something that is implemented into the legal framework as well. This sort of notion of having to share information and in return being able to rely upon information that other others have sort of come across before you. Risk sharing mechanisms and incentives and support have been considered necessary to increase investment and sort of play a part in this upfront cost. We have successfully, I think it was Note, correct me if I'm wrong, who discussed earlier a sort of successful plan that we had in Iceland in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we still have what we call the Energy Fund that allocates yearly grant to energy projects in accordance with the government's priorities on energy transition. And then again, that holds directly hand in hand with the importance of state policy, where this all sort of combines. And just quickly in the end, trying to stay sort of just within my 10 minutes. These are projects that we are currently working on. As you can see, Iceland is exporting its knowledge and know-how all over the world. So just please, if you have any questions, feel free to either drop me a line here or send me an email afterwards, and the slides will obviously be shared with everyone following this seminar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, the legal, it's extremely complex, the legal side, and you've given us a good introduction to all its different aspects. So feel free to follow up with Anna afterwards, and indeed we'll share the presentations by PDF for those who are able to share them. The last speaker, and to sort of wrap up the discussion, pull all the loose strings together, is Rósbjörg Jónsdóttir from the Iceland Renewable Energy Cluster, Managing Director. I'll just pass it straight to you, Rosa.
Thank you so much, Per, and hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to join you here. Now I have to share my screen. See what's happening. Have you stopped sharing on your side, Anna?
Yes, I believe I have. Are you still seeing my slides, or?
No, it's okay. No,
No?
there it is.
Excellent.
Do you see the name? So I'm Rósbjörg. I took over as a managing director of the Iceland Renewable Cluster 1 year ago, and I just want to give you a short overview what it is and what we have been doing. Our vision is that the energy-related activities are the basis of the welfare in Iceland. And through responsible management, the industry maintains and improves the quality of life in our country and ensures economic, social, and environmental progresses. As we actually have heard from all the presenters here today, it was founded 2013 after 3 years of mapping and implementation, and then we were focusing on the geothermal because we had collected and built up a strong expertise and knowledge in this field. And in 2018, we expanded and focused on all energy sources for the entire sector in Iceland. We are a private-driven cluster organization for the sector. It's a non-profit with over 50 members from both public and private sectors. And all of those would like to improve its role and its society. And we say that the cluster collaboration and the cluster platform is an innovation driving force. Our main objective is to strengthen the competitiveness of our members. It is a building up a way of innovate and increase values for both societies here in Iceland, as well where my members are working internationally. We work together with the public and private bodies, facilitating collaboration between each and everyone, from the academics to the investors, governments, corporates, and entrepreneurs. Our main activities today are focusing on collaboration, knowledge sharing, and development by setting up innovation and actions, internationalization actions and cooperations, where we are working with other clusters, and set up education and training and participating in webinars like here today. But what have we learned here today? All of you have shared in a very improving and interesting and exciting way how geothermal can improve our life. And I'm quite sure that the area of Yukon could improve the people well-being. Dietary focuses on the geothermal resources and exploration and development. This part needs to be very carefully worked, and we need to give us time. We have to look ahead with a strong and long-term vision when we decide to take a decision to go ahead with a geothermal project. We need to work very closely on the exploration phases, which were defined in a very deeply way. And then we could see how important it is to select the right service providers. And we need different kinds of service providers, because each and everyone needs to know what is his role in the value chain. We need to work with the regulations, and we need to have a framework. Like Anna mentioned, it can be different from all different places. What kinds of authorities needs to be involved, and that therefore it's the great collections, the great connections to the right people in the right institution need to be found. Then we can what do you say, build up utilization in all kinds of ways, and that is as Kari went through, how important it is to realize how geothermal resources can be used in a very different ways. The direct usage is the advantage of this energy source. It is not only for heating and electricity, it is also for all the cascades. And we need to have the knowledge and take good care of how we can build up the knowledge, train the people we are working with, and find the best possible way. I think that I have taken the overall advantages of this together, because it gives us, it is a local, it is renewable, it's contributing a very important things like foods, like Kari said, and gives each and everyone a great opportunity. We, as a platform of collaboration, our cornerstone has been knowledge sharing, right? We have been doing today. But what we have also done, we have set up we have been so successful during the years since we started, that we have been capable to make Iceland as a showcase, how to learn about the geothermal energy as and its utilization. And it's my great pleasure, the first to introduce you and share with you that we are planning the 5th Iceland Geothermal Conference in the end of May next year. So having said that, I would like to hope that you have learned a lot, that you are convinced that you need to go take the next step into the geothermal world, and use the opportunity to connect with my great members who have been sharing with you the information needed. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Rosa. That's an excellent way to wrap it up and bring all the pieces of our presentation and session today together. Like Rosa, I hope that everyone has learned something and has much to take away, and that this has given you the energy and the power to move forward in a way that works for your community and your territory. So we will be following up to all registered participants with a link to the recording and with a link to download the presentations that we have been able to, that the speakers have been willing to share. I want to thank you again for your participation from across the north. It's great. We're really honored to have everyone, so many people with us today. And we look forward to following up. Feel free to reach out to us at the embassy or to any of the speakers who joined us today. So thank you again. Have an excellent week and see you soon.